Hello, everybody. Glad you could join us for episode number 26 of the Launch and Beyond podcast, a podcast designed to support you not only in achieving great success in your business, but also in other areas of your life as well. When we observe the outstanding results some people achieve in business, sport, and life, many dismissively put this down to luck, good fortune, great genetics, and being in the right place at the right time. And while these factors may certainly have had a part of their success, it dismisses what is not obvious or immediately apparent. The thousands and thousands of hours of hard work, meticulous planning, discipline, and quite often the willingness to go out on a limb and take a risk. Actions, beliefs, routines, and preparation that needed to happen for this to occur. And while some may have achieved phenomenal results unexpectedly, accidentally, or without a huge amount of effort once, they usually are unable to sustain this over the long term. In this week's episode, we're deep into what separates the amateurs from the professionals in every endeavor of life. We look at the mental, emotional, and physical shifts in mindset that need to occur for someone to become a professional in their career, in their business, in their sport, or even in their life. This week's episode is called Turning Pro. We hope you enjoy it. So this should be a really interesting topic that we talk about this week. I'm really excited about that, turning pro. Hopefully it's got people curious, plugged in, thinking, what are we going to talk about? But let's check in with each other first before we kick in. So how's your week been? What's been going on for you?
My week's been good. Seems to always be the trend. I always try and flip it to be positive. Just been treading water, waiting for all these quarantines. We don't know if we're going into harsher restrictions now or if we're staying the same, or so we'll just see what happens. But at least we've got sports this time around. So I've been watching the rugby, my team's winning. I've been watching the footy, my team's winning. So at least there's some happiness happening. And I bought some weights this week from a new supplier. So I've got a home gym sort of started to build and to shape and to mold. And I think you're doing something quite similar as well. Yeah. Just as we mentioned in the last podcast, just trying to control the things that we can control and remove the variables. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, good.
How about you? What was your week like?
Well, mine's one, it's actually going to be quite relevant that we're talking about turning pro. And the pro part of it is about being professional. And really this week to me was about self-awareness and self-care because, last week I talked about having completed 75 hard and how awesome that was, and that's great, really excited. I had one cheap meal that night and I'm straight into it. So I'm day 7 of the next level. But I was noticing that I was a little bit more tired.
Yeah.
And understand, I put that down to, okay, look, you've been training twice a day, every day for the last 75 days. Maybe that's it. But I realized that there's something more that was going on. So I just looked at and took apart different parts of my world and life to see if they were the cause of it. And so this week was really about consulting with my team that helped me perform, the group of health professionals, integrative GPs, acupuncturists, naturopaths. I just went all in conjunction with, and this is where my background comes in really handy, but I just knew that there were elements of it where I was functioning at my burn rate was too high, and that's what it was. So I've just made some distinctions and variations, and it's made all the difference. So that's really what that was for me. It was really about identifying the key factors that help me perform and function at my best, and ensure that I hit those metrics. So now what I've done, I've automate everything as much as possible, but I document everything. So to ensure that I don't miss anything, I've got them on my to-do list and I have to check them off every day. And that ensures that I take them out of my conscious and just become an automatic process. And that's been working really well.
Well, that's awesome. It's a way to flip it around and not leave it up to your mind. And I know my mind just likes to throw 1,000 things in at the same time. So it's good to always have that list and just check that off.
Yeah, because effectively what that is that's what I've worked really hard over time to identify what are the key things that help me function at my best and over and above when I feel like them. So if I've narrowed the scope down to go, I've got to act greater than how I feel. And these are the things that you have to do. These are the non-negotiables. And when I do that, I actually find that helps me a lot. So takes a lot of the stress out of it, means it's automatic and I don't have to worry about anything else. So
Well, that's definitely something I found doing 75 hard was the fact that you turn up and then your exercise is you're done. You've got to do that. Your meals, they're done. You've got to do that. You've got to do your photos. Like everything that you is set for the day gets done. As you say, what gets scheduled gets done.
that's right.
And it becomes simple. You don't have to think as much.
Yeah.
So autopilot almost.
Well, pretty much it is. And I'll talk about that as we go through the podcast because it shows us how important that process is. Now, some people who like the flexibility, who are very creative, buck up against structure. And what Jocko Willink, who we refer to quite often in this program, talks about. Discipline is freedom, and quite often the discipline of setting things in place to ensure that everything gets done means that you actually have the freedom to be creative. And a lot of the time, people who resist that because they find that it's limiting, realize that their productivity doesn't actually go up anymore anyway because they're dictated to by how they feel in the moment, and that doesn't help them express and get the best out of themselves. So that's what I've learned that works really well for me.
Yeah, well, if you've got 5 or 10 things that you have to get done in the day, if you get that done by 10 or 11 o'clock because you're just hitting your stride super early, then you've got your whole day or the rest of the day to be free and to be creative. Like you're not locked down because you've done your critical tasks for the day, your action steps, you've completed them. Then you can go into a reflective state if you want. Then you can go into a creative state. You can use your time however you want to do it. It's not just, now that this is structured, I've done my 5 items, my 10 items. Now tomorrow, I know the 5 or 10. I got to bring that forward because then you put yourself in a state of overwhelm, and it's never positive after that because the next day you're like, oh well, I did that yesterday, so now I can rest.
Yeah. I think that it's an important component is to simplify, document. That's what works in for me. So like I said, if it's a checklist process that works in really really well, there's an author called Atal Gawande who wrote a book called The Checklist Manifesto, and it was I might have mentioned it in the past in the podcast. Fantastic book, but it talked about this guy was a surgeon who studied the infection rates in hospitals and found that even high-level surgeons who should know better quite often were missing critical steps. And so when he initially presented this information to the hospital to say, hey, I'm concerned about the rate of infections that are occurring, the established surgeons were like, what are you talking about? Hang on, I'm not going to...
We're perfect.
I'm not going to go buy a checklist.
Yeah.
But it was when he was documenting and observing him, he realized there were critical steps. So the moment they moved to a checklist, nothing got missed. And consequently, the infection rates plummeted.
Yeah.
So it shows us the importance of following critical steps, particularly at times when you're in overwhelm, particularly when you've got a lot of things going on. It's easier to defer it to a system that you just follow.
Yeah.
And that way you'll get the results and outcomes you're after rather than how you feel in the moment or what you can recall or remember.
Have you read a book called, what is it, Millionaire Mindset?
Yes.
Yeah. Did they mention, because I haven't read it, that's the next one on my list.
T. Harv Eker?
Yeah.
Is that the one? Yeah, it does. It talks about that. He talks about systems. So it does on that. And he talks about, there's a particular tapping type process that he talks about, which gets you to reinforce something to your subconscious. So a lot of the work that he talks about, I loved his book.
Yeah.
Talks a lot about the subconscious programming that's important for you to do. So,
I don't have to read the book. I just I just got the download from you.
That's my interpretation. Well, that was me bumping the.
His tapping. His in a tapping mood.
I'm tapping the microphone. No, that's my interpretation. So everybody will read a book. Sometimes you watch a movie or read a book 5 years later and it takes out something that's really, really different because it was actually interesting. It was Eckhart Tolle's book, The New Earth, that I read the first time, and I absolutely hated it. I wanted to throw it and burn it. Didn't like it at all. 5 years later, I read it again and I went, wow, this is the greatest book ever. And I realized that was me that was different. So how you interpret things, I should say, depends on who you are and how you evolve and develop into. So that's what I've learned over time. I still read the book, Adam. It's going to be a great book.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think so many people have recommended it and reviewed it, and I've seen so many people reading it. and it just seems like it's one of those core books that should be read. So that's definitely next on my list.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because that brings us into our podcast today.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was inspired by a book, interestingly. But so Turning Pro, what this is all about is that for the longest time I've been fascinated and have closely monitored the habits, routines and rituals of elite athletes. Titans of business, highly successful people. So what I've always been interested in is what is it that separates you from everybody else? What is it that allows you to get these phenomenal results and outcomes over and above what everybody else is doing? And it's not just hard work, because if it was just hard work, every hardworking person would be successful. So there's specific key things that make the difference, that makes a difference. So, the top 1% of performance in multiple areas of life, sport, business, are the ones that I was interested in. I was looking to, as I said, find out what it is that makes the difference for them. So that led me to, interestingly, the whole area of neurobehavioral modeling, because people ask me, what's this all about? And it's actually using neuroscience as a way of identifying and coding what is it that helps people excel, perform, make a particular decision. And if we can identify it in one person, how can we capture it, model it, code it, so then you can teach it to other people. Yeah. So that's what I'm really interested in, is how can we take a skill, and we were talking about this earlier on, just before we got on the podcast, where I've moved into another area in the financial world, and I've recruited a specific coach that will help me identify and fast track the learning in that specific area, because that's what I do. I've got multiple coaches in different areas. Even though I am one of myself, I embrace and use the skill sets and leverage on that learning to be able to get results better, faster, quicker. So trial and error is okay, but there's usually a better thing. So I'm always looking for how to speed that up.
Well, that's what we talk about quite often, is the fact that when you're in a business, you could be a bit too close. So it's always good to get an outsider, and we live in our minds 100% of the time. Yeah. So it's always good to get someone else, whether it's a performance coach, whether it's a key coach in an area or aspect or a subject in life. It's great to get them in so that you can see, or you can express your ideas, and they go, well, have you ever heard of this way?
Yep.
And if you go into that situation with an open mind, your results will speed up, they'll accelerate, and you might reach a scope that you never even thought possible, because the person that you're dealing with has had almost a lifelong experience, and go, hey, wait, have you thought about this?
Yeah.
And it just clicks something in the back of your mind, and go, I have, but I didn't know that was actually a real thing, or I didn't even know about that. I can go research it now.
Yeah. And that's what that's all about. So we talked before we started the podcast, about how I go about it is I just follow my own curiosity. If I'm interested in, and you said the same thing, Adam, too, you follow your own passion, your instincts, your drive, and that fuels learning. Then becomes joyful, fun. You're not doing it because someone tells you have to. And that's sometimes when we looked at education, why kids hate school is because they're not not encouraged to follow their own curiosity. And that was part of the reason why my kids went down a Steiner education program on alternative education. That's another discussion point. But to each of them watch them today, which is really fascinating, they quite often go, why do we even go to this hippie school that you sent us to, everything? But I follow how they follow their own sense of curiosity. And it's just depth. They can get to a level of depth that a lot of people don't, because they want to get something and they want to strangle it and immerse it totally. They want to find out everything about it. And that becomes, you don't forget what you learn when you learn in those states. So that's the whole basis of what I wanted to talk about today. And if I've bumped the microphone a few times, I'm sorry. There's obviously a really exciting podcast theme for me, and my hands are flailing everywhere. When you get the video of this, you'll see just how animated.
It's my fault. I've moved his microphone from one side to the other.
I haven't mapped it yet.
And
so
we wanted to see more of your pretty face and less of the microphone boom. So I've moved it over, but he's just his arms are off and going. So
it's thrown me off. I haven't mapped it in my brain just yet in terms of what I can move.
We'll tie a rope around your arm so you don't have to be emotive.
Can't express myself that way then. So the book that I'm talking about is written by a guy called Stephen Pressfield, and it's called Turning Pro. Tap into your inner power and create your life's work. And it had a massive impact on me when I read it. It's not a big book. It's a thin book, probably 100 or so pages. And it was really interesting. I was reading it. I was going, this is okay. It's okay. And I flipped to about page 40 and it just blew the side of my head off. It was so profound. Like I count straight away, as soon as I finished it, I ordered a whole bunch of coffee for all our coaching clients and made sure every one of them got it, because that was really a huge game changer for me. So much so, it's out of all the things that I've read, and I'm prolific. I love reading. I love immersing myself in there. I count that as one of the top 4 books that I've ever read in my life. Not so much in terms of brilliant book, but life-changing. All right. So when I first read Napoleon's Hill book on Think and Grow Rich, that was life-changing for me. And a lot of people who trace back their level of success in wealth trace it back to Napoleon Hill.
Sitting on my shelf, just like every other book.
It's
just
a great
sitting.
book.
Yeah.
It's a great book. And you know what Napoleon did is he studied and researched some of the most successful, wealthiest people in the world at that time and looked for the difference that made the difference.
Yeah.
So it was fascinating, right? So that got me onto the pathway and the journey of basically looking and identifying and modeling behavior that exceptional people do, particularly in the area of wealth. And I went, great, if that's what they're doing, I'm going to do the same. The next book that was a life changer for me was Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within, because that really talked to me about being the best version of yourself and opened my world up to personal growth and transformation. And I think I mentioned in an earlier podcast, after 30 years, I went back and reread it and reaffirmed why it had been so fantastic for me. I just absolutely loved it. And I loved it the second time round too.
On my shelf.
On my shelf, good one. And the other one,
that helps me heaps when it's just sitting on my shelf.
When you get it, you're going to hear, I'm going to be on your shoulder going, yes, Adam, that one's a good one.
That's the good, I'll be looking on my shelf and going, yep, that's the one.
And the other one was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. So that one was also, I'm talking about not just books that were brilliant, but books that changed my trajectory, my life, how I viewed things. And that book by Robert Kiyosaki was phenomenal because it changed how I looked at wealth, and specifically about how we've been conditioned to think about wealth. And it put forward a model, not his probably best written book, I got to be honest, but it was, but the theme got through to me. Yeah. It was so profound, and that's why I mean that. And Pressfield's book was exactly the same.
Yeah,
I looked at it and immediately it just had a massive impact on me. Why? Because he talks about this resistance that we all have. And by resistance, it's kind of like this inner Joe Rogan talks about that, the inner bitch, basically. Yeah. It's that part of us, that the self-talk, the resistance sometimes is external, but sometimes it's internal. And he basically said to do anything, it's essential to be able to work through those, the setbacks, the hurdles, the things you've got to jump through to make things happen.
Yeah.
And so, Stephen Pressfield was an author. He wasn't a highly successful author by any means. In actual fact, he was failing. He's written other books, but he just wasn't getting the reward for effort. He was busting his butt and not getting the results and outcomes. And he was questioning, it's like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? And he just works and said, look, the process of being a professional is working through those resistances. That inner resistance sometimes. Can I do this? I don't know. Who am I to even dream? All those kind of things. And so he wrote this book really about writing, but it's so applicable to a whole lot of areas of life. It's actually very popular in the entrepreneurial space. Yeah. And a lot of business and entrepreneurs use it specifically to help them, particularly in creative and innovation. So is there anything you wanted to add with that, Adam?
It's the inner bitch. You've just got to learn how to silence it. And sometimes it's easier to, instead of silence it, you rewrite it. So like we talk about affirmations and mantras. The second you're like, oh, I'm not smart enough to do this, switch that around, flip it around and go, hey, I haven't learnt the skills yet. So let me go out and sort to learn the skills to get smart enough to do that. And that's it. It's always a thirst for knowledge in that situation. If you go, hey, I'm too tired, I just sit on the couch, I won't get this workout in. It's like, hey, no, get up, do your 30-minute workout, do a 20-minute workout, whatever it is, and then you'll be able to sit on the couch guilt-free rather than hurting yourself internally, like tearing yourself to pieces going, I missed my workout today. I'm fat and I'm lazy and I'm tired and I'm never going to recover from this. Instead, just flip that switch in your mind and just go, hey, no, let's just do it, get it over and done, and you'll have a guilt-free night.
Yeah.
And that's where Jocko comes in, going, the more disciplined you are, it leads to ultimate freedom, because you're like, hey, I'll just do this workout. And then after your half an hour, you can sit on the couch for the rest of the night if that's what you want to do. And you can watch 5 movies if that's what you want to do. But ultimately, your early day discipline has paid off, and you get the reward at the end of the day.
Look, and spot on. And what it comes down to, at some point, a person has to make a decision. You know, a decision that sometimes may be born out of frustration, despair, setbacks, whatever it is, and honoring that decision, basically saying, do I give up or am I all in?
Yeah.
You know, Grant Cardone wrote a book called Be Obsessed or Be Average. And I loved it because part of it, because it just validated how I go about life, where it's like I'm all in, because the reason I share that is I was very fortunate. I had a huge amount of success very quickly. And I bought into the idea that, well, okay, you've arrived now. You can take it easy. You can take the pedal off the metal.
That's it. Yeah.
So I did say that.
Pedal
right?
off the metal.
Pedal off the metal. But I was actually miserable. I wasn't actually as happy. And I realized that the part of me that feels alive, feels great, is the part of me that's extracting every last bit of potential out of myself. Not depleting myself, but just getting the very best out of myself. And I realized that was the model that I was happiest in. So that was really important and helpful. So I needed to come to terms with, that's just what helps me. That's not necessarily the model that helps everybody else, but that's really what helps me. And that was also a really important consideration in there as well. So
I love the startup phase. That's what it is.
Okay.
Starting a business and learning all the new things. After I've been in there for 2 or 3 years, I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore. What's the next step? What's the next process?
But there's some people, a lot of the times that you say that, because some people are geared towards startups, some people are geared towards systems, and a lot of people are geared towards overseeing things and expanding, right? And look, I agree with you as well. In my, we had my wife Bettina on quite a few episodes ago. I think it was episode 20.
20,
right?
yep.
So in our relationship, I'm the one who's the startup energy, get things going. And then the moment it gets to a certain point, I pass that over project, not only to her, but to everybody else in our support team, because my enthusiasm and interest has gone. And I'm excited more by creating something from nothing. And I realize that for it to scale and grow, I can't stay in that mindset. So I pass that on and allow that to do that. And you do see a lot of people who are excellent at startup phase, but they have to then replace themselves with a CEO or someone who keeps that going for the business to fulfill its potential. Because otherwise they're constantly looking for the next thing within something that's established, and they sabotage the impact of the business.
Yeah, I can see where that goes as well. And that's why, I like to sit in my office, and it's not because I'm better than everyone. It's because I'm working on different things now. Yeah. And my staff and my team, they're looking after what's being done now. And they're happy to be doing it. They like stability. For me, I like to just go out and just be crazy. Yeah. Just be not reckless, but just explore all avenues.
Yeah, very cool. So when I mentioned Tony Robbins earlier on about one of the books that changed and transformed my life, he said that for things to change, you quite often need to, number one, raise your standards, and number two, raise your expectations. So if you want to create change and big change in your life, they're the two things that he talks about. And people who have been listening to the podcast for a while might recall I've mentioned Brenda Bouchard, who also is in the high performance space, who talked about when we're looking at changing things in our life and world, one of two things must change. Something must come into your life, and number two, something must come out of you. And if you are going to bring those two statements together and combine them with turning pro, if we were really going to look at, you might have a business, you may have your health or other areas that you just know, I need to level up, I need to step up, I need to go the next stage in level. For when we bring all those three things together, number one, you need to make a decision that things must change. You just got to get to the point to go, okay, whether I'm out of frustration, whether I'm not living my potential, whether I know I need help, number one, I need to make the decision that things must change. The second one is you need to raise your standards and expectations about yourself and what you're capable of. And that taps into the stories we tell, all the kind of things that are possible, the ceilings that we set for our ability to express things to the highest level, all those things.
Reassess your values.
Reassess the values.
And see what you need to do.
Correct, all those kind of things. Number 3, you need to find a compelling reason or a purpose to fuel the drive and connect you with the new behaviors and new identity. So you've got to look at it and go, what are the benefits of me leveling up? What are the benefits of me being professional? And why that's important is because the moment you immerse yourself in this process, there are going to be detractors. There are going to be people going, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Are you okay? Are you sure that that's the right path for you? And that, if you're not resolute and clear on why you're doing it, can be enough to derail you and not allow you to become the professional we're talking about. And number 4 is work against the resistance and the drag, the inner bitch that we talked about, that seeks to draw you and take you back to the previous behaviors, traits, thinkings, and actions that had you at the level that you were before.
Yeah. Oh no, I was just laughing about something in my head.
Okay. As in relevant to...
Oh, no. I was just in a different state.
Okay. All right. Well, okay.
No. But if you look at those 4 topics there, raise your standard, raise your expectations, right? Basically, it's as simple as this. Like, some people look too deep into this. Raising your standards goes, what's the life that I want to live? And then you go, what's the expectation? So my expectation is to get to this level. And then you'll use the second 2 principles. Something must come in and something must come out. So basically you go, I want to live this lifestyle. I want to own my own business. And my expectation is that I'll make a lot of money from my business, for instance. So what do? We go look for the best business book that we can find. And we read it. And that's something coming in.
Yep.
And then something coming out is us using the principles that we've learned in that book to help start our journey into owning a business. And that's the 4, I reckon that's the simple steps to do it. Raise your standards, raise your expectations. Something must come into your life and something must come out of you. And I think that's an easy way of looking at it. What do you want to have? How do you go about it? Bring the information in and then put that into play. And then your expectation and your standard of life will hopefully, if you do it with enough enthusiasm, it'll raise and rise.
Yeah. And you know, Adam, when we talk about turning pro or turning professional, it's not just about sports.
Yeah.
It's not about just education. We're talking about, you could have a craft, a business. You could have, you might want to run a marathon. And your preparation around that is what I'm talking about. So if you are going from, what do they couch to 5 kilometers, if you haven't run before, you can go about it from the point of view, I'm just going to get up and run and just hope for the best.
Yeah.
Or you can follow the principles that professionals who have been successful over a long period of time follow. Break it down to principles, break it down to routines, and follow those. And commit to those. Raise your standards, as you said. Raise your expectations of what's possible, and you'll astound yourself quite literally what's possible when you do that.
Yeah.
But it's I guess approaching it from the perspective of a professional as opposed to a weekend warrior or a hack.
Yeah. So going into it again, you were talking about professional, and what is the definition of a professional?
Okay. Well, I'm going to go and expand on that. I'm going to give subcategories of what differentiates between a professional and an amateur.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, a professional is one who's deliberate and has got an intention and a plan and a process and looks at all areas in a holistic sort of a way. An amateur is kind of one who is recreational, who's a little bit more hit and miss.
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes down to, particularly in the book here, he makes a lot of distinctions about behaviors, traits, and habits that separate the difference between a professional. But a lot of it starts from the mindset. A lot of it starts, the switch will flick in your brain and go, that's it, done. I need to do things differently. And how I'm going to go about things is going to be different.
Yeah.
So let's...
Sorry, just to jump in. The ultimate way I define a professional is, do you get paid for it? And that that is coming to exactly what you were saying about mindset. Do you flip the switch and go, I'm now a professional and I'm willing to charge for this, or am I still an amateur?
Yep. And that's one metric,
Yeah.
definitely. But there are a whole lot of professionals. I'm talking about
A mindset of professionalism, yeah.
professionalism
Yeah,
as a distinct, because there's a whole lot of professionals
Yeah.
that I know who get paid for it who aren't professional.
Yeah.
Right. So you could, and in the example that I used earlier on about someone who decides to make, set a plan or set an intention to run a marathon, they can be a professional in how they approach that exercise, that goal, as opposed to someone who is a professional athlete who's get paid for it, who is not putting in the work in all areas of their life, even though they're getting paid.
Yeah, I understand
So
that.
there's a big distinction in that area. So when Stephen Pressfield talks a lot about the professionals, there's some key areas that differentiate, which is what you're saying, the difference between an amateur and a professional. And number one is the level of preparation, right? So in a professional, they're a lot more meticulous in it, okay? No stone is unturned to ensure they're at their best. So they talk, you're planning the work and working the plan. So this is a lot of what we were talking about earlier on about, how I use that in my own example when I went, okay, there's things that aren't quite right for me. I know enough health-wise to do that, but I'm going to recruit a team around me, and I'm going to surrender to their observation and get their feedback.
Yep.
Find out about what are the metrics that I can do that. And that's an approach of a professional. So as an athlete, for example, the athlete, they're going to focus on, they've got a whole team of advisors around them, for example. They're going to really focus on their nutrition, their level of rest, how much practice they're doing. Things like mindset, visualization, all those kind of things. The amount of study, how much time they're studying new procedures, techniques, drills, all those kind of things, videotape, not videotape, but basically.
Well, some could be because when I was starting off with my triathlons, I was watching so many YouTube videos to go, well, that's the videotape of what shoes do I need to wear. My Achilles gets tight. So before I start running, I put the, what is it? Kinetic? What is it? The
Kinesio.
Yeah,
Kinesio,
the tape. Yeah, so I put that on around my Achilles to make sure that when I'm running the long distance and that leverage, it doesn't accentuate.
Accentuate.
It doesn't accentuate the flare up of that injury. So that's the preparation I take. And then sometimes my knee feels a bit swollen, so I'll take my knee in a certain way, and that gets me ready. Then I put my running shoes on, and that's part of the preparation, because then the second, it's almost like a physical reminder that I've got my running shoes on now.
Yeah,
I've got to flip the switch, and we're using the flip the switch. I'm going to put the Drake song in here somewhere, but we're flipping the switch and we're going, now it's time to run. So that's the preparation. So it goes from taping yourself up, it goes from putting on your running shorts, goes to putting on your running shoes. And in that whole process, you're mentally switching on and going, this is the preparation. Now I'm going to run the 5Ks. I'm going to run the 10Ks, and we're going to do this. And that's just a step of going, this is me being a professional, rather than me going from the couch, chucking on whatever shoes and going, hey, let's go for a 5K run. And then half the time, I don't know, some people are a bit more fit, but half the time, if you come straight from a couch without warm-ups, without preparation, you'll injure yourself somehow. Or you'll have a degenerative sort of injury that's underlying under everything, and you're not prepared for that.
Yeah, no, spot on. And the reason why I was giggling before was because when I say videotape, I try and avoid videotape because I keep thinking of VHS. I'm showing my age there, but video. So professional athletes, they'll study tape. They'll study visuals of their game, their opposition's game. All that preparation is so important and essential. So much so, John Wooden, who's one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time. I think it's the UCLA teams that he coached. He was so successful in it. The first training session he always had with every new group of players was tying the shoelaces.
Yeah.
And people go, what are you talking about? I've been playing basketball I know how to tie my shoelaces. He goes, no, we've got to build up from the bottom up. And so if you don't tie your shoelaces up properly, that leads then to blisters. And that then leads to you not functioning at your best. So he adopted a principle of, for a professional, to go, we're going from shoelaces up.
Yeah.
I don't care that you can do a jump shot and get a ball in from, 30 meters out. We're going to tie our shoelaces up first. And when we've graduated from that, we're going to go to the next level. His preparation was meticulous.
Yeah, and when I went to go buy my running shoes, I use a brand called Hoka, and I walked into Athlete's Foot, which is a shop here. They have like a sensor pad on the floor, and I walked on, and I said to the salesperson, "I always have pain in my heels when I'm running," and they go, "Well, how do you tie your shoelaces?" And I said, "Well, like everyone ties them," and she was like, "No, that's wrong.
Yep.
You've got to loop your lace back in this part here and then run the laces through the loops, so that way it offsets some of the stress off of your heel and it surrounds your foot better." And I did it, and then I started running. I'm like, wow, I got no heel pain at all. And it's something so simple, tying shoelaces. You're like, oh, everyone knows how. Just make sure the shoe doesn't fall off. But there's a technique in everything, and there's a preparation that leads to that technique, that leads to your success.
Yeah, totally. And so we use one example as an athlete, but in business as well too. And let's just say you're a sales professional. So let's just say you're in real estate. Let's just say you're used to making pitches or presentations or proposals for people. So the professionals prepare for that. They'll quite often role play, they'll scenario train, they'll train for contingencies, they'll plan and train for all these variations, know how to engage, know how to gain rapport, all those kind of things. An amateur is just going to rock up and hope for the best. And so a lot of the
Fake
time,
it till you make it.
fake it till you make it, or you're trying to wing it. And that's what I said to you. That's one of these Hail Marys. It might come off once, but when you study the most productive, the most successful people, not just once, but over years, months, years, I should say, and sustained level of high performance, it doesn't come down to luck anymore. It's deliberate, it's preparation. And, we in our dojo, it was like, what's the word? Preparation when you prepare. Obviously,
The more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle.
That's the one. I had a mental blank around that one.
That's
as well.
all right.
But that's exactly the same
we,
thing.
we train. We
There you
were
go.
at the same mindset. Sensei Frank will be happy.
Yeah. So, but that's exactly what happens. Is if your preparation is there when the time comes that you need that, it's there. You don't have to defer to, and I'll talk about a little bit about that cognitively, your brain, because it goes into an automatic part.
Well, yeah, I was actually talking about this last night. Not that I'm a professional fighter, but the amount of training that I've put in my fight career, which it was 13 years, and I have been in street fights. Like it happens sometimes, especially with businesses that are late night and with drunks coming in. Sometimes you get involved, and we always used to try and break it up, but it used to flare up when people are drunk. They've got low inhibitions. It just happens. Anyway, second nature kicks in, and because I've been preparing for this for so many years, it was like second nature. I just deflect everything. I never wanted to inflict injuries, but I would always do everything in self-defense. But it just happens. It's like you've been preparing for this your whole life, and that was the moment. And I know it's not pro, but the way we went about the preparation was the way a pro would approach it. If you saw how we used to train, before the lessons start, most people get there half an hour before. We're stretching for half an hour before we start. We've taped up our toes and our fingers to make sure they don't dislocate again. And you go about it in a mannerism of professionalism. And then you go and you do your training session full tilt. And the people that don't do it, you don't want to partner with. You're like, this is a waste of my time. This is not bringing value to them or not bringing value to me. And that's what Sensei was all about. Even though we weren't professional fighters, we walked in and everything was about being a professional. And it just made it so much easier and so much more fulfilling to do what we were doing.
Yeah, mate, you know when you're in the presence of a professional.
Yeah.
You can walk into a mechanics workshop and you can look at the workshop where everything's in place, everything's in the right spot. Well, you go into a kitchen, Adam, and you know that more than anybody, and you can just see everything's deliberate, everything's got a place. You know, you move your hand to the right, and exactly what you need is right there. You watch a surgeon who is high precise in their intention, and everything's exactly where it needs to be. They're not opening up a cupboard looking for that special tool, that shifter, that knife, that scalpel. It's right there.
Where the fuck is the balloon
Pretty
whisk?
much. It's all prepared. It's all prepared, right? It's already done. You've given it the foresight. You had the foresight to actually go, okay, I'm going to need this, and this. I'm going to have them ready to go, because not only from a professional point of view too. There's, and I haven't mentioned it before, but it's what it does for you, and in terms of gives you certainty and confidence, but also what confidence it projects to everybody else. So if you're in an environment where you're creating a service and you look like you're all over the place, the person on the other end of that isn't going to necessarily be confident with you. And so the professionalism also projects certainty and an aura of confidence around you that people can buy into and go, that's my person. That's my male or female who's actually going to help me with this. Why? Because I trust them, because they know what they know.
Yeah. Well, point number 3, because I actually read this week's topic. Point number 3 is act greater than how you feel. And you mentioned the surgeon. If they've got all their tools there and they rock up to the surgery and they're not feeling it this week or this day, everything's in its position. It's second nature to them. They come in, they've done this 1,000 times before. They come, they use it. And even if they're feeling low or not into it, there's nothing there that's out of the ordinary for them that will affect them mentally to bring them down even further. Yep. And they know surgery is one of those things that you never sort of hear about. Surgeons turn up every day and do what they have to do every day. And yes, they make good money. But at the same time, everyone has up and down days. But most people don't accept it from healthcare professionals. So if you set yourself up, your scalpels or all your tools ready, you can go in and be a professional, do what you need to do, and then move forward with the rest of your day.
Yep. Yeah, spot on.
Sorry, I jumped ahead on.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We'll come back to it as well. We'll expand on that. But the example is relevant.
Yeah.
Right. It's relevant in there. So if point number 1 that differentiates a professional from an amateur's preparation, point number 2 is that professionals follow specific routines and rituals that help them function at their best. Okay. So what are these rituals and routines that we talk about? Well, a lot of them can be around their training. A lot of it can be about sleep. A lot of it can be about, say, things like self-care, meditation, what it is that they do regularly. Now, if you're in a business, you may have a routine, and a ritual may be you have an alignment meeting first thing in the morning that gets you really, really clear on what your objectives, goals, and priorities are for that day. So that's a specific routine and ritual. It could be, we mentioned, in terms of role play, it could be things that we go through each and every time. It could be additional training, what have you, that shows and upskills everything that you're basically doing. And the reason for that is that it actually automates the process, and it means that you don't, as you said, you think about it. So I give an example. When someone talks about someone choking, okay, in not in a jiu-jitsu sense, but in a high environment where they're asked to perform and they underperform. It happens. You see it a lot in sport. Now, what happens? There's a neurological reason why that happens, right? And part of it is that when we're thinking about something, when we're thinking about how to do things, we're in the front part of our brain, the cognitive part of the brain, or the frontal cortex. Now, that part of it is still forming, and you're still in your brain, you're still in your thought. The moment you've done things a lot of times, 1, 2, 5, 10, 100, 1,000, probably more like 1,000 and 10,000, the brain, for efficiency, then moves that function to the cerebellum, which is at the back part of the brain, where it's a lot more efficient. It doesn't have to think about it. It's not in there, but it's an automatic process. So that's what happens when you talked about your martial arts earlier on, where there's automatic process. You don't have to think about it. You act before you've thought about it. Yeah. So that's the efficiency that happens. And so the more repetitions, the more skills, the more reps you've done in something, the more it becomes ingrained into you that you do things even without thinking about them. And the reason why professionals are able to do that is because they've solidified and they've done so many repetitions or so many times that they've gone through this that it's now second nature. It's automatic. So consequently, they don't have to think about it. They don't have to talk themselves out of it. It's just plan the work the plan, and the process takes care of itself because it's automatic.
Yeah, and like I always say, to this point, you've got three things you can always control, and that's what you put into your mind or what comes out of your mouth, like your thought process. Number two, what you can put in your mouth, what you eat, and you talked about nutrition and all that. And then number three is what you do with your body. So if every morning you wake up and you have mantras or affirmations that you say, like today's going to be a great day, I'm going to make lots of money, whatever your affirmations or your mantras are, every day and every way I get stronger and stronger, whichever one you want to use, it's tailored to yourself. You can start your day like that. Then you get up, you have a good substantial breakfast or a good clean meal, if that's what you're doing, if you're not fasting. And then you could have do some exercise for 20, 30 minutes in the morning, and you just start yourself firing. And your body is in a good space, your mind is positive, your body's been firing, the blood's been flowing, you've oxygenated your muscles after your sleep, and then you come have a good breakfast. You're already setting yourself up to be a professional. You're already setting yourself up to come and encounter issues, but you're in your best mindset as you walk through the door and these issues pop up.
Yeah, spot on. So we mentioned those 2 points, both habits. I should say preparation is point number one, and point number two is the specific routines and rituals. So the third thing that Adam mentioned earlier on that separates a professional from an amateur is the capacity to act greater than how they feel. So many of us have felt, as you said, tired, exhausted. There's times where I just don't feel like I've got the energy to do it. But the commitment that a professional has in getting up, dressing up, showing up is the difference. And so a lot of the times, and I know it's happened to me, Adam, may be the case for you as well, very much like a stage performer, right? Like if you've gone to the theatre or a live show, a band or whatever, you've paid your money. So you have an expectation that the performer as a professional is going to put on the show. And you're not even considering that they may be tired, they may be exhausted, or they've done 4 shows already that day. When you turn up, you have an expectation that you're a professional and basically the show goes on. And stage performers, you hear that all the time. They'll be exhausted, tired, whatever. They get on the stage, boom, they just fire it out. The moment the curtains come down, they're like, oh man, I'm exhausted and tired. And that's the big distinction and the key is that the professional knows when the game's on. And when the game's on, they need to be at 100% switched on. They can't afford to focus on how they're feeling. And a lot of the times, emotion is really just energy in motion. So when they get moving, that generates the sensation. And I'm not sure if it's happened to you where the times I've gone, I don't want to train. I don't feel like it, whatever. I still rock up. I go through it and I just don't feel better.
Yeah.
And that sometimes some of the hardest sessions, the best sessions, I should say, I've ever had in training were the ones that I didn't want to go to.
Yeah. Well, it's like, for instance, during the 75 hard challenge, there was one night where it was raining. I think you were early on yours, and I was.
It wasn't just raining; it was raining and blowing, and the rain was coming in sideways.
It was like terrible, and it was cold. And normally in Melbourne, when it rains, it doesn't get super cold. Like it's one or the other. But this one was cold, wet, windy, and you just get up. And you still do your preparation, you still put on your shoes, you still strap up yourself, and you still go through the motions. And then as you're doing it, you're like, I'm tired, I'm cold, I'm wet. And then you look around and you go, no one else is out here.
Yeah.
And then you start pushing yourself and you're like, look, no one else is out here. And it's just like that FU mentality that we've spoken about. It's just like, I'm the greatest out here ever. And you just start psyching yourself up. And then you get back home and you're just like, oh, how did I even manage that? That was my longest run. It was cold, it was wet, it was windy, but you just go to a different level sometimes. And that's part of being a professional. Like you approach it with a different enthuse, a different way of like, how can you get the best out of every situation? Every movement is purposeful. And that's why when I go to the gym with people, I don't like training with people anymore at the gym because it's really volatile. Some people, even if they're a great training partner, if they have an off day, they'll have a bad off day. And I just sit there and go, "Hey, we're here. Just push yourself." And most of the time, they'll respond. But the longer you go out with the same people, you notice they get lower and lower because they need you to push them more and more. And I'm like, "Yeah, I can't do that anymore." But it's funny. It's part of being a team.
Yeah.
You know, when you got a training buddy that's always, yeah, not always. I don't want to offend any of my training buddies. But yeah,
You've just thrown them under the bus, Adam.
yeah, I didn't use names, but at least when you turn up, and that's being a professional.
So we're going to move to point 4, but there's a particular intention that I'm going about going through things at the moment. A really good friend of mine reached out during the week. He said, "Loving the podcast." So thank you to Brent for really reaching out. He goes, "Could you help me when I'm listening? Because sometimes you get to point 7 and I've forgotten what point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are." So great bit of feedback that he's actually given us in there. So when we're going through them, if you find now I'm going back and revisit him, you can always check out these the information on the show notes.
Yeah.
But I'm going to set an intention to actually review those so that they're top of mind there as well too.
Yeah.
So point number 1, we said that separates a professional from amateur is preparation. Point 2 is the specific routines and rituals. Point 3 is acting greater than how we feel. And point 4 is there's a consistency. And consistency that separates a professional from an amateur is specifically about what they do, how they act, and how they feel. So the biggest challenge for a lot of people is following through until they get the job done. So what happens, like, yes, they could be not feeling like it, but it's the difference between a professional is they show up day after day after day after day. It could be a sculptor, it could be a painter, it could be an athlete. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs are the days to turn up after you've had your biggest disappointment. And, you know, they talk about it from sport, for example, is that you get thrashed one week. So how you decide to turn up the next week will be determining where that goes, whether that's spiraling. And a lot of teams, for example, who may be on a form slump, may need to review and go, how did we prepare? What did we do? How committed were we to this process? How consistent did we do what we said we were going to do? And if they're half-hearted about it, if they're not planning the work correctly and properly, if they're doing things sometimes, not all the times, that's going to give them variable results. And that's probably the biggest metric between the consistency results and outcomes between professionals and amateurs. The amateurs are going to be more likely to get hit and miss type results, whereas the professionals can mitigate risk, mitigate the variations by virtue of everything that they prepare, how they follow things through, and how consistent they are in everything they do.
Yeah, I find that a lot when I'm playing music, whether it's the drums or guitar. If I take a week off, my stick speed drops on my drums, my fills, as I'm moving around the kit more and more, it slows down, or I hit off beats, and not on purpose, like they're just out of time. And yeah, sometimes I'm exaggerating a little bit by saying taking a week off, but if I am drumming every day, I notice that my speed is up. I notice that I'm on time more often, and I don't listen to a click track. I'm just in the zone more. And then same with the guitar, like my finger dexterity, the more you do it, the more you flow. But if you take a week off or a month off, it's like you've got stones as hands and you can't move your fingers quick enough. And a song that was easy for you to play last month is so difficult right now. And that's just because you haven't taken that time to be consistent and to be able to flow and to move your mind in that sort of way. Because if you're always a literal thinker, sometimes the creative juices don't flow. And you have to be consistent and go, hey, yeah, I'm literal, I'm professional, I do my work, and then after that I'll have time to be creative. But you have to be consistent in what you go about, and it shows. The results always show. So it's about doing small incremental movements to consistently makes you better every day.
Yeah, they say there's a saying in neuroscience that says that the neurons that fire together wire together.
Yeah.
And effectively what that's basically saying is that you create synapses or connections between the neurons, the nerve pathways, that then form a pathway to your brain the difference between like broadband and dial-up.
Yeah.
So the more you do something, the nerve fibers get myelinated, which is basically, like a sheath, like a covering on the wire on the nerve, and that basically the more myelin you have around a sheath, the higher the connection speed is, and so things just are like really fast.
Yeah.
And so that's how you can consolidate and build on things. You have this multiplier effect where you're not having an action and they just flow on with one another. And that's exactly right. You talk about guitarists, I talk about it as the nimbleness in the fingers is there from consistency and continuity. So
that's where you've got a guy who's been playing guitar and he's deep in his 60s or 70s, like say when Santana was alive. And you go and you look how fast he's moving his fingers, and I'm like 20 when I was learning, I'm like, I can't even move my fingers. All right, he's got experience, but he's also got another 40 years of using his hands. How does he keep so nimble, and how does he keep his dexterity up? And that's because he does the exercises and he plays so often and is consistent. He hasn't let his body deteriorate.
Yeah, spot on.
Well, he didn't.
Well, at least his fingers. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so point 1 is preparation. We talked about. Point 2 are specific routines and rituals. Point 3 is acting greater than how they feel. Point 4 is, we talked about, is consistency. So point 5 that separates a professional from an amateur is honouring agreements with themselves and others. And the biggest agreement you'll make with yourself, the biggest trust consolidating things that you'll do is within yourself. So if you make a decision to follow through, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up and go for a run, and it rains, and you go, maybe not. You're depositing your deposits are nowhere near as strong as your withdrawals. So you're already making withdrawals in your account, your integrity account, your trust account, your honoring your agreements with you account, that you don't consolidate, you don't build your esteem, your confidence, anything like that. So honoring agreements with yourself is the first starting point. And the reason why I say that is this is more as an extension in terms of a professional. So if you say, let's say you're a service provider, you're a plumber, you're a carpenter, heck, you're a health professional, and you say you're going to call someone, you're going to be somewhere at a certain time, and you're not, that makes a huge withdrawal out of that account.
I can notice you're looking at me because I'm always late.
No, that wasn't looking at that. I just have no. I'm anal about time. That's just my issue. That I'm a recovering time specific. But no, I actually wasn't looking.
I'm always late, and you're just looking straight down and go, "Keep your agreement, son."
And I'll be up front. Like, I'm not the subtle, take a snide at someone. I'm the short sort. I'll just walk straight in and tell someone straight away. So if I have an issue with you, I'll let you know straight away. Just be clear about that. But really, what I'm talking about is it's really important. And of all the things in my background, in particularly in health, but then also now that I'm coaching, there are things are with precision. There's a specific time. That's your time, and that's my expectation is that you're there at that time, and because I will be. But when people, when you say to someone, "Hey, I'm going to call you," and you do, or follow it up, there's almost been an expectation that people expect that it won't happen.
Yeah, and
so consequently, they're surprised. So if they say, "Yeah, I'm going to call you at the end of my session," or "I'll call you on the way home," and you do that. It's like they're surprised. So it's really important that, if you make the call when you say you're going to make that call, you're going to follow up when you promise to, you turn up early, you communicate clearly. They're agreements that people can feel comfortable and reassured by, and that separates you from there. You can have a plumber who's exceptionally professional. You can have a medical practitioner who's unprofessional.
Well, I was going with the concept of I wanted to get rid of my smartphone. It's become a bit more difficult now. But I do eventually want to get rid of my smartphone, and I want to live my life the old way in terms of you call someone and you go, "Hey, we can turn up and we're going to be here." Because I find so many people flake out now and they're like, oh, I'm stuck at work, and they're sitting on their couch and they're like, "Oh, I can't make it tonight." And it's so easy to text it to you now that it becomes so simple. But then not holding the agreement with you. And the funniest things is sometimes you meet random people out and they're like, "Oh, come visit me at work or whatever," and you actually turn up and they go, "Oh, I didn't actually expect you to do this." I'm like, "Yeah, but I told you I was going to do this, and I'm good to my word. Yeah, I might be late by 5 minutes, but I told you I'd be here." So, and it's funny how people respect you differently when you do that, because they go, "This guy is good to his word," and they're surprised.
Yeah, but Adam, just on that too, because like, I actually wasn't looking at you, but I'm gonna,
We're gonna get this one on the record, huh? Just look straight.
no, but I actually, but what you did though is you honoured an agreement, because we said, okay, let's meet at this time. Now, what you did though is you actually sent a message through and say, hey, I'm running late. I've been held up. I'll be X amount of time late.
Yeah.
So that's still honouring an agreement, right? What I'm talking about now is, let's just say you've got a situation where you and I agreed to meet at a certain time, and you got held up and you rocked up 25 minutes later for the same reason, but you hadn't told me.
Yeah.
That's not honouring an agreement. Honouring an agreement will be, I'm really sorry, I'm on my way, I got held up, here's what's going on, before the time, so that I know. But that's actually the case. So anytime that, that's what I do. Part of the reason for me why I'm anal, and I'll share that, is because when I was a kid, I've had to. It's funny. I had to help to slow down the regulation of stress that happens for me. But what would happen for me as a kid is my mum and dad used to go and work, and I used to get dropped off to go to school. Right, I used to get babysat before I went to primary school, and so because my mum and dad were up really early, they'd go up to work. Be up at 5:30. And so I'd get up at 5:30 as well and get dropped off at a lady's house who had a kid who was in my class. And I'd get dropped off, and so I'm getting up at 5:30, get dropped off their house at 6 o'clock in the morning, and school starts at 9. We're about 500 meters away from school. But because that kid could never get out of bed, I was late to school every day. And I'd get punished and have detention. And I'm like, what gives, man? I'm up at 5:30 every day. I'm late to school because of this other kid, and I'm getting punished. And so it created, and that happened for 5 years. And so
you didn't beat him up every so often.
I did.
Yeah,
actually, I got
just
really
get your own back
to the point where I just went, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. So you can imagine at 7, 8, 9, 10, rocking up every day. You're already the migrant kid.
Yeah,
who's already trying to fit in, trying not to create waves, and to constantly get punished and be after school for things that were outside of my control. That really frustrated me. So that's why I am anal about time. But what I just wanted to reassure you in that regard is that, to me, honouring an agreement by letting someone know, hey, I'm going to be 10 minutes late, I'm really sorry, I totally get that.
Yeah, I come at two angles. Sometimes it depends what situation it is. Sometimes I get frustrated because it's a work day and my time is valuable. It's not more valuable than anyone else. Time is valuable to everyone. But I come at it as well sometimes a different angle, going, this person's not here at this time and they've agreed to it. Is everything okay with them?
Yeah.
Has something happened?
Yeah.
Because, all right, it's all well and good. Business is business and all this, but my mind goes into a different spot and goes, are they okay? Do we need to send someone to find them?
Yeah.
And then they rock up 15 minutes late, laughing, oh, sorry, I got caught up in traffic. All right, I understand that, but my mind just went to a different spot, and I'm glad you're fine. And that's it. You get frustrated, but you're like, I'm glad you're fine. And that's the main thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not a parent, but I imagine that's what a parent's mind would be. Like, if your kid doesn't turn up and they're like 15 minutes, 20 minutes late from school, you're like, what's happened? Yep. And it's a bad mindset to go into, always going, what's wrong? What's happening? It's a negative space, but I just want everyone to be happy and healthy and I don't know.
But that helps. But in that scenario, Adam, if and my mum was like that, so she would have loved the idea of mobile phones, where I could actually text message,
track your phone,
and say everything's okay. Yeah. No, but if I was running late, because my mum was a panicker, and she would freak if things were deviation. My dad was different. He didn't stress out about it, but my mum did, and so that's me bumping the microphone again. So
sorry,
that was me.
I'm going to rubber pad that thing or foam padding.
So I totally get what you're saying. Yeah. And that would be, in my situation, I would have been able to honour agreement by communicating in advance, hey, everything's cool. I'm just running a little bit late. Everything will be fine. They can relax.
Yeah.
So that's taking care of that. So let's move on to point number 6, but let's quickly review for the benefit of the people who could really help find this helpful. Number 1 is preparation. Number 2 is specific routines and rituals. Number 3 is acting greater than how they feel. Number 4 is consistency in their actions. Number 5 is honoring agreements. And number 6, in terms of what separates a professional from an amateur.
Actually, I've got a story.
You do?
This is a story time for acting better than you feel.
Okay.
There was this one time.
This one time.
I went to Adelaide.
Yep.
And it was the first time I traveled for work. And I was, 26, 27. And we had a very big day the next day. So we arrived the night before the event. The guy who I was with, he did a lot of the prep. And the next day, we had a lunch of 150 people. And we had to serve 4 courses. And then we had a dinner of 200, serving the same 4 courses, but just to a bigger person in a second venue. So we halfway through the day, we had to prep in the morning, serve lunch, pack everything up, go to the next site, do that all again, but just for more people. So it was a big night, and I love Adelaide. Adelaide's just a little playhouse for me. So I went there, and we arrived, we had dinner, we went to the hotel, and it was about 10 o'clock. I'm like, you know what, let's just go out for a couple of cheeky drinks. The guy I was with, he was in his hotel room. He was being good, doing his emails. He's got a family, all this stuff, so I was probably talking to them. I went out, and I started having a couple drinks, and then I had a couple more, and that bar closed. And I go, hey, what's good in Adelaide? And they go, this bar. So we went to the next bar, and I went till their lock-in. And then I went to the next one. And then then the hospitality people were like, hey, this guy's going to every bar we're going to. They're like, hey, do you want to come out with us? And I ended up going to a nightclub. I think it was a Sunday night or something in Adelaide. And I got back to the room at 3 o'clock in the morning, terribly hungover. Like I woke up 6 o'clock the next morning, terribly hungover, feeling like crap. But I got up and I still did what I needed to do because I was there as in a professional capacity. And even though I inflicted it to myself and I was feeling terrible, I got there and I did what I had to do. And that guy who I travel with, he goes, I hated you in the morning because you turned up to work how you turned up, but you did everything and you excelled and it was so easy and smooth and I didn't stress for the rest of the day. So I respect you for being a professional, but don't ever do that again.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a personal story of me being an idiot, but turning pro and then
the turning pro, that's right. I would be out of integrity if I don't say that you were professional in turning up, but the preparation was probably the part that let you down, right?
It was lacking.
Okay, so that would be point number 1. So that's not a judgment call. I'd be out of integrity if I've just gone, I get it. That happened really well. And truth is, there's times that I've been underprepared for things and I knew it.
Yeah.
And that was the point I went, I don't want to do that. I don't want to feel like that again. So I get what you're saying, but that's the difference, like in that scenario, you turned up, you honored an agreement, irrespective of how you felt, you probably analyzed it and went, yep, I could have, should have done this differently.
It hasn't happened again.
Yeah. So there you go. So that's the learning from that as well. So, and a lot of the times the reason we set these expectations of ourselves is usually when we go, you know what, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't show up that way, or I can't prepare that way expecting that I'm going to get great outcomes and results. So I got through that once, but that's not really going to serve me if that's how I keep doing that. So, and I just want to move on. Number 6 is setting a high standard for themselves and others. So probably great continuation from what you just said there as well too. Here it's about setting standards on things like ownership, accountability, and very early on in the piece we talked about above the line, below the line, which is about personal accountability, personal, if you're going to actually set up and get the best out of yourself and your team, it's about living what we call above the line. You might want to refer back to that podcast if you can't remember the specifics of it, but we're talking about taking ownership, being accountable, focusing on the results, focusing on the things that help you excel, and letting go of things below the line that don't serve you, things like reasons, excuses, and justifications. So and blame, all those kind of things. So we'd probably refer people back to that podcast if you want a little bit more about that, but it's actually really important about setting high standard for yourself. So if you can remember those first 6 points already, point 7,
Well, just leading on, sorry,
yes,
cut in on that.
yeah,
After that day,
yep.
something
So
flipped.
we're going back to
The Adelaide,
story. Okay.
Radelaide, off to Radelaide. Anyway, so after that day, I sat down and I reflected and I go, yeah, all right, I pulled it off this time.
Yeah,
How many other times can I pull it off? And I set a standard. I go, if I am getting paid
yep,
to be somewhere, I will be there in my full capacity. And that's it. I kept myself accountable. Yeah, I've had drinks after work, and most of us did, but I don't stay out to 3 o'clock in the morning anymore.
yep,
On a work night. I'm back latest 1 o'clock, and that's generally because the rest of the team is with me,
yeah,
and we're all in the same boat. It's not me being worse off than anyone else. And when I say the team, the person generally who's hiring me, we went to dinner and then we went to a bar afterwards. Get home or get to the hotel at 1. That's okay. But there's no more drunken, like stupidly drunken nights to 3-4 o'clock in the morning in a professional capacity. And now that's me taking ownership of the situation, and that's me being accountable to myself and to my employer
and to your team.
Yeah, that's it.
Because like I think that what's really, really important, and it highlights a lot where, let's just say the model these days, particularly in sports, for example, is they've got a leadership team, a group of people, and so it moves it away from just the coach to a leadership team, and it's the responsibility of the leadership team within the team to raise the standard and the expectations that they have the whole team. And so a lot of times, if there's an indiscretion with a player, they quite often it's the leadership team who actually enforce any punishment for them.
Yeah.
Because they're basically, hey, dude, we expected you to turn up the best version of yourself, and we rely on that version of you. You're letting not only yourself down, but us down, and as a team. And so consequently, if you can't honor that agreement with us, we can't trust you. We don't want you part of the team. And that's the point that this is the difference, because what's fascinating, and you'll see a lot of the times in players who have been, have got so much potential, but they're just failing to live up to that potential. And a lot of the times in codes and specific codes, there's differences like the Jordans who are just exceptionally professional all the time. But there's other people who were, in terms of preparation, right? Kobe Bryant, and we're just their preparation is legendary.
Well, that's what Tim Grover said. He goes, "I was hired to stop them from preparing because they would overtrain. They would because that was their mentality,
mindset." So in there, right? But there's other people who were hit and miss by virtue of the fact that they were a professional athlete, but they were approaching it as an amateur. Their mindset and their whole ethos about how they went about it wasn't befitting of a professional. And sometimes they had to go in front of their peers and get some home truths about how their behavior was affecting the rest of the team.
Yeah.
And a lot of them who have gone on incredibly took that on and went, I need to change. And so consequently now seeing the potential that a lot of these players, not only just in the sports that we're familiar in AFL, which has happened, but suddenly how you had this middle of the pack player who suddenly excelled, and you go, what happened? They turned pro.
Yeah.
They looked at their nutrition, their diet, their preparation, their rehab, all of those components, and in each category that they leveled up, they had this multiplier effect that turned them from an amateur to a professional.
Well, keeping yourself accountable reminds me of Remember the Titans, where there was a game where they were down and the leadership team stood up, and one of the guys was saying, hey, you're not perfect, I'm not perfect, none of us here are perfect, but the team is perfect. Yep. So you better turn up and you better give it everything and be accountable to the team.
Yep.
And then everyone started doing the small things for each other again. And that's where the team was cohesive. They came together and then they won the game. So that's it. Just be accountable. And sometimes you need to hold a bigger ownership. It's not just be accountable to yourself.
Yeah.
If you hold it, you're accountable to your family, you're accountable to your staff, you're accountable to your business, your sports team. It actually pushes you. It gives you a bigger meaning, because some people are easy with not holding the agreements to themselves. Oh, I won't go for a run today. That's fine. But when you're going out with the team and you're not going out on a run with the team, that's bad on you.
Yeah.
and then no, I've got to go for that run, and it keeps you accountable. So that again, it goes into becoming pro.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason that's the role coaches fulfill, coaches in sport, coaches in business, coaches in life fulfill is personal accountability. Because a lot of times people will do whatever it takes not to disappoint and let down their accountability buddy. They're more likely to let themselves down than an accountability buddy. And so that's why having someone who is keeping you accountable to what you said is important actually helps you along the way, because you don't want to let them down.
Yeah.
And in the process of not letting them down, you don't let yourself down and you progress and move forward as well.
Well, a lot of the time, like I find that I have this issue that I want better for others than they seem to want for themselves. I'm not saying everyone, because there's people who want better for themselves than I want for them. And not saying a negative way. They've just got a bigger picture than I could ever imagine for them, because I don't know them that intimately. But I always want someone to be better. So if I'm your accountability partner, I will be your accountability partner, and I will push you to that next level. But for myself, I'll be like, I'll take a little bit of a step back sometimes and just be a bit more comfortable. And I said to you before the podcast, I'm looking to really change that. And going through the second round of lockdowns, we're working home. This is the perfect time for me to sit down and reflect. Like in the first lockdown, I said, how do I build my skills to be a better person? And that's what I've identified the issue now. And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to go, all right, what's my morning routine going to be like? Am I going to journal? Am I going to take my nutrition to the next level? Am I going to work out at home in the morning? Am I going to work out in the evening? And sit down and reflect so that I can, go from the amateur to a pro lifestyle.
And I think it has to start with self.
Yeah.
If you start with self and make those commitments to self, that then becomes like an expanding ecosystem around the central theme. But that's what you have got control.
Yeah.
Your own capacity, and that's what will change. So anytime someone makes massive change, it always starts with self. When they can do that, they can honor agreements and help themselves accountable to what they said they were going to do by themselves for themselves. That's the difference that makes a difference.
Yep.
Cool. So point number 7 is that separates a professional from an amateur is they know when to turn the game on and know when to bring their best game at the time. So really, you might have seen you talked about, and I mentioned it before about, you turned up, Adam, as you said, unprepared in terms of your own self, but when you actually needed to show up. So when you needed to show up, great. That's one component of a professional who can turn it on when they need to. And what you might have seen in sport a lot of times now, and a lot of the preparation, because it's the mindset part of it. If a team is coming up against another team that is much better or ranked better, the psychology, the way they prepare themselves is they basically say, we're looking forward to embracing the challenge ahead of us. So they are looking at going, I need to be on. I need to be switched on in the best way to get the maximum level of my skills to be able to confront this challenge that's ahead of me. Now, in order for me to do that, I have to have gone through the last 6 steps before. I need to have prepared. I need to have kept a groom, all those kind of things. Why they're important along the way is by the time you're showing up on stage, the moment you walk onto the field, the moment you walk into your office, the moment you walk in to consult or to negotiate, you need to be the best version of yourself and realize it's showtime.
Well, I don't know how familiar you are with rugby, but my team, Cameron Smith, is the captain of Melbourne Storm, and he's played 421 games as of last night. But he is the oldest player in the league. He is easily the most experienced. He's played on 32 different grounds as a professional at that capacity. But he sets a tempo. If he sees the team is getting hit really hard constantly for the past 5 minutes, he'll start slowing down the game. And he has the ability to kick it in certain positions. He has the ability to change the flow of the game. And he is such a professional that he'll lift his team. He'll slow down the game enough so that they can recover, and then he'll start lifting the pace. And he has enough trust in his team to back him up. So he can set the pace, and that's why he's been so good for so long, because he will set the tackles. He'll be the first one to tackle people. He'll also be the first one to kick, and he's also the the hooker. He always I forget the term. Sorry,
right.
but yeah, he's the one that always sets the tempo, and he's the one that turns up every time. And it's funny because everyone goes, "What happens when he's not in the game?" But he's groomed the next person to do exactly the same thing, and the next person down is almost 20 years younger. Like it's such a big difference, or 17 years, but he's such a big difference. But he's groomed him to the point where that person's a pro as well.
Yeah.
And now, because he can see that he's going to have to step down eventually, he's putting him into that position and making sure that he's a pro before he leaves. Because as a professional, you always have a plan for once you're stepped aside, what's going to happen to your business, your sporting club. Is the culture just going to crumble?
Yeah, your succession plan.
Exactly. Yeah. And to be able to sit there and go, all right, well, we've got that succession plan in. It's a different type of professional. It's a really selfless type of professional because the club is bigger than them, or the business is bigger than them. Even if you own it, it's still bigger than you.
Yeah.
And this is the thing I try and get to my parents to go, that's company money or that's company thing. And then this is my personal finance. They're two different entities. I support and I back and guarantor the business, but we're two different entities. If I'm not good for the business, I'll take a step back. And that's it. And I find that's a way of becoming a professional because you keep yourself accountable and there's ownership and you're trying to build that team and that leadership.
Yeah, spot on. So let's keep moving on. So we mentioned preparation is point one. Following specific routines and rituals is point number two. Acting greater than how they feel is number three. Consistency is number four. Honoring agreements with self is number five. Setting a high standards for himself is number six. Knowing when to turn the game on is number seven. Number eight is resilience. And this is a really key thing that differentiates professionals from amateurs, because the professionals are resilient, determined to keep going despite setbacks. So there's going to be, in any professional's journey, whether it's academic, whether it's in business, whether it's in sport, there are going to be setbacks. And setbacks quite often are going to be painful and hurtful. And a professional will regroup, take the learnings, come back better and stronger. So if you can imagine you're a professional sports person who hasn't been performing very well, and you get dropped, and it's natural to feel the disappointment of that. No one likes that. Or if you're in work and you have a performance review and someone says, look, I'm sorry, but your skills and what you're bringing to the table is nowhere near as effective as it could be. So we're going to have to let you go. So a professional approach is obviously, yes, being disappointed, but then going, okay, what can I take on board that can help me be better to come back a better, stronger version of myself? And so how can I use this information to improve that? So if a coach is telling you, look, your defensive skills are nowhere near as good, an amateur will just not necessarily address that.
They will be defensive.
They will be defensive.
but not in the right way.
Actually, spot on. So the professional will go, okay, that's a hole in my game. I need to develop that. I'll work on that.
Yeah.
Or if someone comes back in your work scenario, or you're consistently getting feedback that your ability to communicate is not your strong suit, a professional will develop themselves, develop the skills in there, immerse themselves in training, guidance, coaching, whatever it is, to bring that skill to world-class level. That's the difference between a professional and amateur.
Yep.
Amateur will try and keep doing the same thing, showing up in the same way, bringing the same version of themselves, hoping that will get them through this time.
My communication's not right. Your communication's not right. I think you need to work on your communication.
Yeah.
And that's deflecting the blame, like not taking ownership, not taking... Again, that above the line, below the line, and again, it's so applicable in this situation.
It is, and you know, like I grew up playing a lot of cricket as a kid. I don't play it now. I'm not as interested in it as I was, but I grew up playing,
after all the game tampering.
No,
and
way before that. No, look, I grew up, and there was a time. I don't know that I did. I don't know how I got everything done as a kid as I did, because with all sport and study and it was fantastic growing up in terms of activity, right?
We had no responsibility.
True, that helps. But I used to play a lot of cricket and played cricket to a high level, and whenever someone got dropped, there was always a saying that because I was a batsman, I basically my currency was trying to score as many runs as I could. I was an opening batsman, and if there ever was a time that you were dropped, the saying they always say is perform so well that they can't ignore you. So if you felt aggrieved, you didn't feel that you should have been dropped, or you were disappointed by that, it was then up to you to raise your standard, to raise your outcome, so that people couldn't basically ignore you, and you would be back in that scenario.
Yeah.
The people who got dropped that couldn't handle it never came back to the game. And I saw that happen so many times. It was such a big insult and an affront to them, they couldn't cope. But the people who took that feedback and grew from that were the ones who forced selection back into a team, but then also that governed how they went about everything else. Because they basically say how you do one thing is how you do all things. And if you were dropped and you took that learning and got better, you're also going to do that if in your business things don't work out really well and you get some harsh feedback, you're actually going to regroup and take that on and become resilient as time goes on to get better and better.
I give you the big FU mentality. That's, you're going to drop me. I'll show you why you should never drop me again. And that's it. And you just turn it around.
Yeah.
Be resilient.
Yep.
Just change the mentality.
Okay. So point number 9 is regulation of their emotion. This is a big difference that separates professionals from amateurs. It carries on from what we mentioned before, Adam, is using that fuel you talk about, that FU energy. You can use it in a way internally to drive you to lift your game, not necessarily sulk or project it or blast somebody else, because that's not necessarily a professional. It's about going, I'm really angry with what you've actually said, and the reason why this is really relevant for me, because this was the part of me that I had to develop and grow. I had a lot of, a whole lot of resentments growing up, and that I always felt like I had to prove things to people. So consequently, I used that as fuel to drive things over. And then occasionally it would spill out and spill over into other areas where I wasn't getting the best out of myself because I was so in it. And the ability to detach myself from the emotion was a game changer. To be able to say, I can really perform better as a professional if I can find a way to cycle through the emotion that I'm feeling to get to the point where I can make better decisions. And a lot of the time you see that when people are in clinch moments in sport, when people are in really big negotiation stages here, the people that invariably are the wins are the ones who actually have control over their emotions, who can slow down their heart rate, who can actually regulate to be able to access all the intelligence they have without being taken out by how they're feeling emotionally in that moment.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, it's just regulating emotions. It's people talk about being calm under pressure. That's a way of regulating your emotions. The for sports, when someone's constantly coming up in your face, being aggressive, they're trying to tackle you. Again, in that Michael Jordan documentary, they show that the Pistons were the physical aggressors of the league at the time. So they wouldn't just worry about the ball. They'd throw in little elbows and little punches and all that. And the first year the Bulls went, they just let it control their emotions. They went into a shell. Next year they came back, they were more resilient. And they just said, hey, if they're going to give you aggression, we meet them with aggression. We meet them with physicality, but stay cool, stay calm. Don't let it take over you. And that's the difference. You've when someone's up against you, you take a breath, take a deep breath, reflect, but you push back in a calculated way. Don't let your emotions overcome you, because that's when you become reckless. You just become reactive rather than calculated.
Yeah.
And that's not a professional.
Yeah.
A professional is supposed to be, not always, like everyone has off days, but you're supposed to be deliberate and calculated in everything you do as a professional.
Yeah.
And acting greater than yourself. And that's it.
Yeah. So that's probably one of the biggest areas that I've been able to learn in myself, is being able to regulate emotions, and that separates the difference between, how I was able to consistently perform as opposed to what happened before. Because if I didn't have regulation of emotions, I'd act totally emotionally, and that wasn't always the best response, and or the best was the best reaction in there as well. So I'm closing out on point number 10. So the 10 points. So before I do that, let's recap very briefly. Point 1 is preparation. Point 2 is following specific routines and rituals. Point 3 is acting greater than how you feel. Point 4 is that there's consistency in terms of what we do, act, and think. Point number 5 is honoring agreements with self and others. Number 6 is setting a high standard for self and others. Number 7 is knowing when to turn the game on when it's needed. Number 8 is resilience and being determined to keep going despite setbacks. Number 9 is regulating emotions. And number 10 is really about being focused on the results that the team or you need to perform at your best. So a metric we talked about earlier on about above the line, one of them is results. So a professional is constantly reviewing the data, reviewing the situation, reviewing the profit and loss statements, reviewing all the information that are coming to them that are showing them just how they're tracking. So a lot of the times, professionals will recruit experts to help them leverage what they know, what they don't know, and what they need to know. They quite often, they'll recruit coaches or support team to identify blind spots to keep them accountable. And a willingness, particularly, I find in terms of results, is to look at themselves, no matter how great the results are, and look and go, can I do this even better? Because let's face it, the Tiger Woods, the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans of this world are going to be incredibly successful just by virtue of what they're doing. But they still had coaches, and sometimes coaches who were nowhere near as good as they were, that helped them get the best out of themselves. And so really, if they were focusing on results, they looked at it and said, when I actually recruit other people to be around me, I get so much better out of myself, which invariably helps me get better results for me and for my team as well. So that rounds out the 10 parts for me. Adam, is there anything you wanted to add in that final part?
No.
I think of results. That's probably the easiest.
That's self-explanatory. Again, that's part of reflecting. The first four parts that we said, raise your standard, raise your expectations. It's part of what's your result. You've got an idea of what you want, and you've got to work on raising your standards, raising your expectations. Something that comes into your life and something that comes out of you. It's all ends in a result. Just make it the right result.
Yeah, spot on. So if after hearing what we've spoken about today, you're left with, okay, that's great, what do I do? Well, there are 4 action steps that we have that would assist you to transition from an amateur to a professional. So number 1 would be, if there are areas of your life that you're just not getting the results you'd like, ask yourself if by changing your mindset from an amateur professional, that would be the case. So if you are hit and miss in the results you're having, if you're inconsistent, if you're finding that you're pulling up short in terms of what you'd like or what you think you could do, then examining your mindset, examining how you approach things from a perspective of a professional could be really helpful. Okay, point number 2, you might ask yourself is, where do I need to raise my standards and expectations, both of myself and my team? This is what you were talking about just a moment ago, Adam. That's a really important thing. This is most of the decisions that determine your transition from amateur professional come down to you. Having that talk with yourself in the hallway of mirrors and saying, okay, is this the best I can do? Is this who I am? And if it's not, what do I need to do? So that's a really important part of it.
One thing I just want to go on with that is, we love our family and our friends, but as you said, you've got to look in you, and you've got to not be scared or worried of what anyone's going to say. You've got to be able to raise your standards and expectations to know that you're going to live your best life and not listen to other people. This is about you. And it might sound selfish, but ultimately it leads to being selfless, because you can provide your best self to these people later on. So don't be discouraged from really reflecting and going deep in yourself to build yourself to be a different person.
Yeah, good.
And it's a better version of yourself. Don't be, that's what I mean when you're saying a different person, being the best version of you.
Yeah. Great. So point number 3 in terms of action steps would be, and this is what you're talking about here, a lot of it in terms of how I'm interpreting it is, who do you need to become? So for you to become a professional, who do you need to become in your approach, yourself, addressing all the things that you just said? You know, there's a big component, and a lot of it starts with us.
Yep.
The decision to lean in and confront the things that you may be scared of doing or that you need to do in order to level up. And point number 4, I highly recommend you read the book Turning Pro, because it's, like I said, it's not a hard, difficult book to read. The first half of it, you're moseying along and thinking, okay, well, that's okay. And then suddenly you turn over and it's quite a profound book. I hope people like it as much as I did. Pretty much everybody who has read it gone, okay, I can see why you like the book so much. So if you want to go to a next level in terms of the results and outcomes you're getting in your life, then give that a read and let me know what you think about it. Hopefully you like it as much as I did.
After this episode, I've got a stack of 8 books that I've got to read now. So thank you. Thanks, Jim.
That's all right. So Adam, final comments before we finish up the podcast?
Yeah, just love you and just be happy with you. And when I say happy, I mean happy with the output that you're putting in. So just step it up, be a professional, love yourself, give yourself breaks. Don't be super hard on yourself, but just always constantly be consistently building smaller pieces and moving forward. And that's it. That's all I've got. Love yourself, be happy. Just want the best for you.
Yeah, a good way to finish up. So hopefully people have taken some insights into how they could improve their life by becoming pro, and how big a distinction and big a difference that can make to your life as well. So I'm done. I just want to thank everybody for joining us once again, and just a reminder that you can connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and our extended Launch and Beyond community on these channels. We're also on YouTube. That Adam's been uploading longer snippet videos, so really excited about that as well.
Yeah, we've got more coming out, more full length ones now. So
right.
Yeah,
Awesome.
You can get to see our ugly mugs. My ugly mug, Jim's beautiful mug. Bit more often.
Thanks, Adam. So if you've got any questions, any comments you want to ask us about the podcast or anything else that comes up, please feel free to reach out. You know, a lot of the times thoughts, questions people have, they're the same ones everybody else has, but nobody's prepared to reach out and start that conversation. So if you are feeling that, if you have a question, please do so. The information, the dialogue, the ripple effect will be much greater than you realize. And finally, if you are enjoying the podcast and finding value in it, we'd be grateful if you could go over to iTunes, leave us a review, and allow us to share the work we're doing with the greater, broader community. So from me, thank you very much. Have a great week, and bye for now.
Thanks, guys. Bye.